in my view, the 20th century was the century of the physical sciences and math. I'm a mathematician, and we all know we have witnessed this tremendous growth both on the mathematics as well as in many aspects of the physical sciences. We sent people to the moon, we explored space, we've developed transportation infrastructures that are unimaginable centuries ago. All of that happened in the 20th century. From a mathematics perspective, math was at the service of the physical sciences, and much of that development was propelled by the growth of math and the ability of mathematics to be at the service of the physical sciences. But now I have a different view. I think that for the 21st century, this is going to be the century of the social sciences, not the physical sciences. However, I continue to believe that mathematics will continue to be the main driving force for our evolution in the social sciences. I think when it comes to sustainability in particular, there are going to be two pillars that are going to be driving sustainability. On the one hand, social science, which will be taking care of its design, but then we're going to see mathematics that will take care of its implementation. The two will work very well together with each other, and a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today is ways in which mathematics is developing a new Fintech Triangle, which is going to be the focus for my presentation today. A new Fintech Triangle where technology, mathematics, and social science come together to define a new reality, which is taking the financial sector by storm. I want to start with one example that happened in 1990. I have here an article from the New York Times in May 24th, 1990, when something revolutionary happened. Harvard University and the City University of New York decided to eliminate their stocks in tobacco companies. That was a decision that took the financial sector by storm. Back then, this was a very unusual move. Tobacco companies were the most profitable companies from a value creation perspective. In the famous Nabisco deal, that was gave rise to the hedge funds as we know them today. It was said that a tobacco company creates a product for a cent and sells it for $1. That is 100 times profitability. Totally remarkable. It's the best concept of a company worth investing in. Harvard University took the unusual step of stepping away from these very profitable investments, and the rationale for that was driven by the fact that it was considered that tobacco was damaging for the health. So for the first time we saw an event which in a very explicit way told the investment sector that social responsibility considerations were going to be taken into account. Tobacco companies were not particularly hurt by this. It was a very small investment. It was just a few $1 million. $3.5 million of the portfolio was being divested from tobacco companies. But it was the beginning of something very interesting. Perhaps from our perspective today, we can see how a good decision this was. Tobacco companies started to get lawsuits lawsuits because they were producing products that were harmful to their clients. Their customers were paying for something that damaged their health. This was considered to be the grounds for social financial responsibility. Tobacco companies started to get sued by the public, and they started to lose those lawsuits. This is interesting because lawsuits tend to diminish the value of a company, and the equation that you produce a product for a cent and you sell it for $1 was no longer relevant. Now you have a situation where you are producing something for a cent, you're selling it for $1, but you're exposed to massive lawsuits. Projecting this forward, a lot of what is driving social responsibility investing is, on the one hand, the responsibility aspect of it, but then there's a financial element that has developed also, which is no one likes to be sued. And the lawsuit, in the case of the tobacco companies, stopped at the tobacco companies. The shareholders were protected from that. But one can imagine a situation where the shareholders could be held liable for some of those damages. Long-term investors, pension plans, insurance companies, whose time frame is decades, are taking this into consideration, and in addition to the driving forces of social responsibility, there's another driving force, which is the possibility of large losses in the future. The equation doesn't make sense anymore, and many of them, like in 1990, are deciding to be very careful in their choice of their investment portfolio, not from a performance perspective, not from a volatility perspective, but from a social responsibility perspective and the potential losses that could be associated with that in the future, which are unknown and could be large. And this is the beginning of what is called now in the sector ESG, which is going to be one of the topics that I'm going to be discussing in my presentation. From a certain perspective, what we can see, the equation that is at play now, is an equation which is a little bit different. In 1990, we had a situation that the profitability today was questioned because of the possible lawsuits tomorrow. And I'm talking about this in addition to the social responsibility aspects that we all know. I'm talking about this other unknown aspect, which is beginning to be very relevant in finance, considerations of the price of risk. So, to the price of time, which everybody, all of my students know, everybody knows, studies this in finance, we're in another layer, which is the time price of risk, knowing that these are things that could happen 30 years from now. How do you build a 30-year potential liability into an equation? For most investors, it looks like 30 years is a very long period of time, but not for insurance companies, not for pension plans, which are some of the biggest investors that we have in the world today. They are the main drivers for this type of thinking, and now the public is following that. If I look at the evolution of social responsibility, then what we can say is we started from some considerations in impact investing, the impact of our actions, of our investment actions in the world, to a situation where we are about to have well-defined rules and procedures in place that would give us outcomes when it comes to the investment decisions that we make, and this is what, in my definition, leads to sustainability.